My true story from North Carolina. I wasn't in the photo, so I wasn't in the will. My name is Dorothy May, and I'm 78 years old. I live in a small house on Magnolia Street in Asheville, North Carolina, where the mountains hold secrets and the morning mist carries whispers of forgotten stories. Today, I want to tell you about the day I discovered I had been erased from my own family's memory, and how that erasure became the most liberating moment of my life. For decades, I existed in the peripheral vision of my children's lives, not estranged, mind you. We exchanged Christmas cards, birthday calls, and occasional texts. But I was like background music in a restaurant, present but not really noticed, familiar but not actively heard. My 3 children, scattered across different states, had built their own worlds, their own traditions, their own definitions of family that somehow always seemed to occur just beyond my reach. Sarah lived in Charlotte with her husband Robert and their twin boys, Matthew and Marcus. They were active children, always involved in sports and school activities, living in a world of soccer practices and honor roll achievements. Michael had settled in Virginia Beach with his growing family of 4 children, working as an engineer and coaching Little League baseball on weekends. His wife Jennifer kept their household running with military precision, organizing every detail of their busy lives. And Rebecca, my youngest, had moved to Tennessee after college and never quite found her way back home. She worked as a nurse in Nashville, caring for other people's families while somehow struggling to maintain connection with her own. They were good children, successful in their own ways, accomplished adults who had built meaningful lives. But somewhere along the path of their adult lives, I had become optional, not unwelcome, but not essential either. I had become the mother who was always there when needed, but rarely thought of when not needed. I had learned to fill my days with small pleasures and meaningful activities. Morning coffee on the porch, tending to my vegetable garden where I grew tomatoes and green beans, volunteering at the local library where I read to children during story time, and writing long letters to my sister Margaret in Florida. I had made peace with this quiet distance, telling myself it was natural for children to spread their wings and fly. What I hadn't prepared for was the moment I would discover just how invisible I had become. It was a Tuesday in October when I received the envelope. Not addressed to me, but mistakenly delivered to my mailbox, a mix-up by the postal service that would change everything. The return address read, Sarah Mitchell Photography, my daughter's married name, and her small business. Inside was a collection of photographs from what appeared to be a family reunion, along with a note that read, Here are the prints you ordered for everyone. The first image stopped my heart completely. There they were, all of them. My children, their spouses, my grandchildren, even my late husband's brother Harold and his family from Tennessee. They were arranged on the steps of what looked like a beautiful mountain cabin. Everyone smiling, everyone perfectly positioned in their autumn clothing. 3 generations of our family, captured in a moment of pure joy and togetherness. And I wasn't there. I stared at that photograph for what felt like hours, my hands trembling as I held it up to the light from my kitchen window. I searched for any sign that I had been remembered, that perhaps I was behind the camera, or that someone had asked where I was. But the composition was too perfect, too complete. This wasn't a casual snapshot. It was a formal family portrait, the kind you frame and hang over the mantelpiece, the kind that declares to the world, this is our family. The weight of that realization settled over me like a heavy blanket on a summer day. I examined every face in the photograph, noting how naturally they all belonged together, how seamlessly they fit into the frame. My grandchildren, whom I barely knew despite years of sending birthday cards and Christmas presents, were laughing with their cousins. My children looked relaxed and happy in ways I hadn't seen in years when they visited me. Even my brother-in-law Harold, a man I had known for 40 years, seemed more comfortable in their presence than he had ever been in mine. My hands trembled as I flipped through the other photos. There was Sarah's husband Robert carving a turkey at what looked like a Thanksgiving feast. My grandchildren playing in piles of fallen leaves. Michael and Rebecca laughing over some shared joke I would never understand. There were pictures of them hiking on mountain trails, of them gathered around a crackling bonfire telling stories, of them creating memories I would never be part of. The final photo showed them all holding hands in a circle, heads bowed, saying grace before their meal. That's when I saw the date stamp, October 15th, my birthday. They had held a family reunion on my 78th birthday, and I hadn't been invited. I set the photos aside and reached for my cordless phone, my fingers fumbling with the numbers I had memorized decades ago. Sarah answered on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Mom, how are you? I was just thinking about calling you." "I received some photos by mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and calm. "From your reunion." There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable silence that stretched between us like a canyon. I could hear children playing in the background, the sound of a television, the normal sounds of a busy household. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its brightness. "Oh, Mom, we didn't think you'd want to come. You never seem interested in traveling, and we thought it might be too much for you. You thought it might be too much for me to spend my birthday with my family?" Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her taking a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "We didn't realize it was your birthday weekend. We just picked the dates that worked for everyone." Everyone. The word hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Everyone except me. "Sarah, did you even consider inviting me?" "Mom, you know how you are. You always say you're too tired, or it's too far, or you don't want to be a burden. We just assumed you wouldn't want to come." They had assumed. They had built their assumptions around my absence, crafted their plans in the negative space where I used to be. I had become so predictably dismissive of their invitations that they had stopped extending them altogether. But here's what Sarah didn't know. I had been saying no for years because I sensed I wasn't truly wanted. I had felt like an obligation, a duty to be discharged rather than a joy to be celebrated. So I had protected myself by declining, by making myself small, by disappearing gradually until my absence became more comfortable than my presence. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. "I should let you go." "Mom, wait. Are you upset? We could plan something else, just the two of us." "No, sweetheart, I'm fine, really." But I wasn't fine. I was devastated. And the devastation was about to get much worse. The conversation haunted me for days and nights. I found myself replaying every word, every pause, every inflection in Sarah's voice. I thought about all the times I had declined their invitations, all the times I had made excuses, all the times I had chosen the safety of solitude over the discomfort of feeling unwanted in my own family. Had I created this distance? Had I taught them to expect my absence? Or had they grown so accustomed to my not being there that they had simply stopped seeing me as part of their lives? I spent sleepless nights walking through my house, looking at old photographs of better times. Pictures of Christmas mornings when the children were young and excited, of birthday parties where I was the center of attention, of family vacations where we were all together and genuinely happy. When had things changed? When had I become expendable? I remembered the gradual shift that had begun after William's death 5 years earlier. My children had been supportive during the funeral, attentive during the first few months of my grief. But slowly, their calls became less frequent, their visits shorter, their invitations more perfunctory. They had their own lives to live, their own families to tend to, their own problems to solve. I had understood this, or thought I had. I had tried to be the understanding mother, the one who didn't make demands, who didn't guilt them into spending time with me. I had been proud of their independence, their success, their ability to build lives without needing me. But somewhere in that process, I had become unnecessary. The house felt different now, filled with the ghosts of conversations that should have happened, invitations that should have been extended, moments that should have been shared. I found myself talking to William's photograph, asking him what I should do, how I should handle this betrayal that felt like a death. A week later, I received a phone call from my lawyer, Harold Whitman, who had been handling my family's legal affairs for over 20 years. He sounded uncomfortable, clearing his throat repeatedly before speaking. "Dorothy, I need to discuss something sensitive with you. It's about your late husband's estate." My husband had died 5 years earlier, leaving behind a modest inheritance that we had always assumed would be distributed equally among our 3 children. Harold had been managing the details, and I had trusted him to handle everything according to William's wishes. "What about it, Harold? Well, there's been a development. Your children have been in contact with me about amending the distribution of the estate. They've requested that the inheritance be allocated based on family participation and presence. I felt something cold and sharp creep up my spine. What does that mean? They've submitted documentation showing their involvement in family gatherings, their commitment to maintaining family bonds. They want the estate divided based on who has been most present and engaged in family life. Harold, I don't understand. What documentation? He cleared his throat again, a sound that was becoming increasingly irritating. Photographs, mostly, from family events, reunions, holiday gatherings. They've created a kind of record of participation. The photographs, the family reunion, the perfect portrait where I didn't exist. And because I'm not in these photographs, because I haven't been present at these gatherings, they're saying I shouldn't receive an equal share of my own husband's estate? Dorothy, I want to be clear. This isn't legally binding. They can't actually change your husband's will without your consent. But they're arguing that the original distribution doesn't reflect the current reality of family relationships. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by 40 years of marriage memorabilia, looking at the empty chair where William used to sit and read his morning paper. And I realized that my family had not only erased me from their present, they were trying to erase me from their future as well. They're using my absence against me, I said, the words coming out as barely more than a whisper. I'm afraid so, Dorothy. They're claiming that since you haven't been actively participating in family life, you don't deserve an equal share of the inheritance. But Harold, I'm their mother. I raised them. I sacrificed for them. I gave them everything I had. I know, Dorothy, and legally they can't do this without your agreement, but they're hoping you'll see their point of view. Their point of view. That because I wasn't in their photographs, I wasn't in their lives. That because I hadn't been present at their gatherings, I wasn't present in their hearts. That because I had allowed distance to grow between us, I had forfeited my right to be remembered. Harold, I need you to do something for me. I need you to draw up a new will. My will. Of course, Dorothy. What did you have in mind? I want to leave everything to people who will remember me not for being in their photographs, but for being in their lives. Over the next few weeks, I began to examine my life with a clarity I had never possessed before. I looked at the patterns I had created, the choices I had made, the ways I had slowly erased myself from my own family's story. I remembered the first time I had declined a family invitation. It was Sarah's birthday party 3 years ago. I had been tired, recovering from a bad cold, and the drive to Charlotte seemed overwhelming. I had sent a gift and a card, promising to visit soon. But soon had never come. I remembered the second decline, Michael's promotion celebration. I had been dealing with a plumbing problem at home, and the expense of the repair had left me feeling too poor to contribute to the celebration. I had congratulated him over the phone, but I hadn't been there to toast his success. I remembered the third, the fourth, the fifth. Each time I had a valid reason. Each time I had promised to make it up to them later. Each time I had chosen the safety of my own solitude over the risk of feeling unwanted in their presence. But now I understood what had happened. Each absence had made the next one easier to explain. Each decline had made the next invitation less heartfelt. Each time I had chosen not to be there, I had taught them that they didn't need me there. I had been disappearing from their lives one missed moment at a time, and they had been learning to live without me one gathering at a time. By the time they stopped inviting me, I had already trained them to expect my absence. The realization was both devastating and liberating. I had played a role in my own erasure, but understanding that gave me power to change it. Or more accurately, it gave me power to accept it and move forward. I began to think about the life I had built in the margins of their lives. I had friends at the library, colleagues from my teaching days, neighbors who had become like family. I had a full life, rich with relationships and activities and purposes. I had simply been waiting for my children's validation to feel worthy of that life. I started to document my own story, not through photographs, but through words. I wrote about my childhood in the mountains, about the poverty that had shaped my early years, about the scholarship that had allowed me to go to college when most girls in my situation stayed home. I wrote about meeting William at a church dance, about the courage it had taken to marry him against my parents' wishes, about the joy and terror of becoming a mother at 22. I wrote about the years when money was tight, when I had sewn my children's clothes by hand and grown vegetables in the backyard to stretch our grocery budget. I wrote about the night shifts I had worked at the hospital while William was in school, about the way I had held our family together with will and love and stubborn determination. I wrote about the sacrifices I had made, the dreams I had deferred, the parts of myself I had given up to ensure my children had everything they needed. I wrote about the loneliness of those years, the way I had sometimes felt invisible even when I was standing right in front of them. And I wrote about the gradual shift that had occurred as they grew up and moved away, how I had learned to find joy in their independence, pride in their success, satisfaction in knowing I had raised them well enough to not need me anymore. But I also wrote about the pain of realizing that not needing me had somehow transformed into not wanting me, that the space I had made for them to grow had become a chasm too wide to cross. As I wrote, I began to understand that my family's inability to see me was not a reflection of my worth, but a limitation of their vision. They had become so focused on performing family, on creating the perfect photographs, the ideal gatherings, the Instagram-worthy moments, that they had lost sight of what family actually means. Family is not about being in the photograph. Family is about being in the love, in the support, in the daily choice to care for one another. Family is about remembering someone's birthday even when you can't be there to celebrate it. Family is about making space for each other, not just in pictures, but in hearts. I realized that I had been enabling their narrow definition of family by constantly apologizing for my absence, by making myself smaller to accommodate their discomfort. I had been so afraid of being a burden that I had become a ghost. But ghosts, I learned, have a unique power. They can see everything, understand everything, and choose when and how to make themselves known. 6 months after receiving those photographs, I made my choice. I called each of my children and told them I was rewriting my will. I explained that I would be leaving my house to the homeless shelter, my savings to the literacy program, and my personal belongings to the friends who had actually been present in my life. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Sarah called me selfish and vindictive. Michael accused me of being manipulative and cruel. Rebecca cried and said I was punishing them for one mistake. But I wasn't punishing them. I was finally protecting myself. You have spent years telling me, through your actions, that I am not essential to your family, I told them. You have created a family narrative that doesn't include me. I am simply accepting that narrative and making my own choices accordingly. But Mom, we love you, Sarah protested. I know you do, sweetheart. But love without presence is just a word. Love without effort is just a feeling. Love without inclusion is just a memory. The conversations that followed were difficult and painful. My children were angry, confused, hurt. They couldn't understand how I had gone from being the accommodating mother who never complained to being the woman who was willing to disinherit them. They didn't understand that I hadn't changed. I had simply stopped hiding. I had stopped pretending that their casual dismissal of my feelings was acceptable. I had stopped accepting crumbs of attention and calling it love. Sarah accused me of being dramatic, of making a mountain out of a molehill. It was just one reunion, Mom. One photograph. You're acting like we've been ignoring you for years. Haven't you been? I asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. Michael tried a different approach. He offered to include me in future gatherings to make sure I was in the next family photo. But his offers felt hollow, obligatory. He was trying to fix the symptom without addressing the disease. I don't want to be included out of guilt, I told him. I don't want to be in your photograph because you're afraid of losing your inheritance. I want to be in your life because you actually want me there. We do want you there, he insisted. Then why haven't you acted like it? Rebecca, my youngest, was the most honest. Mom, I don't know how to have a relationship with you. You've been so distant for so long, I don't know how to get close to you again. Her honesty was like a knife to my heart, but it was also a gift. She was acknowledging the distance, admitting her role in it, expressing a desire to bridge it. "I've been distant because I felt unwanted," I told her. "I've been protecting myself from the pain of feeling like an obligation." "But you are wanted," she said. "You've always been wanted. We just didn't know how to show it." That conversation with Rebecca opened a door I had thought was permanently closed. We began to talk regularly, not about surface things, but about real things. She told me about her struggles with depression, her fears about her children, her regrets about the distance that had grown between us. I told her about my loneliness, my fears about aging, my sadness about feeling forgotten. We cried together, laughed together, began to rebuild something that had been broken for years. But the damage with Sarah and Michael was harder to repair. They were angry about my decision regarding the will, resentful about what they saw as my manipulation. They couldn't understand that I wasn't trying to punish them. I was trying to save myself. Sarah, in particular, became vindictive. She told other family members that I had become bitter and selfish in my old age. She painted me as a victim of my own delusions, a lonely old woman who was punishing her children for living their own lives. Her version of events spread through our extended family like wildfire. I found myself defending my choices to cousins I barely spoke to, explaining my pain to relatives who had never shown interest in my life before. But in the midst of this family drama, something unexpected happened. People began to reach out to me. Not family members, but friends and acquaintances who had heard about my situation. They shared their own stories of feeling forgotten, overlooked, erased from their family's narratives. I discovered that my experience was not unique. There were other mothers who had been gradually written out of their children's lives, other women who had made themselves so small that they had become invisible. We formed an unlikely support group, meeting weekly at the community center. We called ourselves the Invisible Women, and we shared our stories, our pain, our strategies for reclaiming our lives. Through these women, I learned that visibility is not something that is given to us. It is something we must claim for ourselves. I learned that our worth is not determined by other people's recognition of it, but by our own understanding of it. I began to volunteer more actively in my community. I started a reading program for elderly residents at the nursing home. I organized a garden club for people who wanted to learn to grow their own food. I began writing a column for the local newspaper about life after 70. Slowly, I built a life that was full and meaningful and entirely my own. I stopped waiting for my children's approval and started seeking my own satisfaction. I stopped measuring my worth by their attention and started valuing my own contributions. 1 year after receiving those photographs, I received a call from Sarah. She had been going through old family albums and had found pictures of me from years past, pictures where I was the center of attention, the heart of the family, the one everyone looked to for guidance and comfort. "Mom, I found these old photos, and I realized something. You weren't always absent from family gatherings. You were the one organizing them. You were the one making sure everyone was included." "That's true," I said. "What happened? When did you stop being the center of our family?" It was a question I had asked myself many times. I think I got tired of being the only one who cared about keeping us together. I got tired of being the only one who remembered birthdays and anniversaries and important events. I got tired of being the only one who made the effort. "So you gave up?" I gave up trying to force people to love me the way I needed to be loved. I gave up sacrificing myself for people who didn't appreciate the sacrifice. There was a long pause. "Mom, I want to try again. I want to do better. I appreciate that, Sarah. But I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm not going to make myself small anymore to accommodate your comfort. I'm not going to apologize for taking up space in my own life. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about you fixing me or saving me or including me out of guilt. This is about us building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I want that too." Sarah and I began to rebuild our relationship slowly, carefully. She started visiting me once a month, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely wanted to spend time with me. We cooked together, gardened together, talked about things that mattered. Michael took longer to come around. He was still angry about the will, still resentful about what he saw as my abandonment of the family. But eventually, he began to see that I hadn't abandoned the family. I had simply refused to be taken for granted by it. Rebecca and I grew closer than we had ever been. She brought her children to visit me regularly, and I became the grandmother I had always wanted to be. Not the distant figure who sent birthday cards and Christmas presents, but the actively involved woman who knew their favorite foods and their biggest fears. As for the will, I kept my promise to myself. I left my house to the homeless shelter, my savings to the literacy program, and my personal belongings to the friends who had shown me what real family looks like. But I also included a letter for my children, explaining my choices and expressing my love for them. I wanted them to understand that my decision wasn't about punishment. It was about recognition. Recognition of the life I had built, the people I had helped, the difference I had made. I wanted them to know that I had not been erased from the world, even if I had been erased from their photographs. I had been present in other people's lives, visible in other people's stories, essential in other people's happiness. Today, as I sit in my garden watching the sun set over the mountains, I think about that photograph. I think about the empty space where I should have been, the absence that spoke louder than any presence ever could. I think about how sometimes not being in the picture is exactly where you need to be. I have learned that family is not about blood or obligation or shared photographs. Family is about choice, about presence, about the daily decision to love and be loved. I have found my family among the people who see me, who hear me, who make space for me not out of duty, but out of joy. I am 78 years old, and I am not in their photograph, but I am in my own life, fully and completely, for the first time in decades. I am not in their will, but I am in my own story, writing the ending I choose. And that, my dear friends, is the most beautiful inheritance of all. The mountains hold secrets, and the morning mist carries whispers of forgotten stories. But some stories refuse to be forgotten. Some voices insist on being heard. Some women decide, even at 78, to step out of the shadows and into the light. I am Dorothy May, and this is my story. I may not be in their photograph, but I am in my own frame, perfectly positioned, completely visible, entirely free. And that makes all the difference.